Hello hockey fans, and welcome back to another video. If you were to ask any person on this planet to name a hockey player, 9 times out of 10 the person will respond with the name Wayne Gretzky. Given that he has gone down in history as the greatest hockey player of all time, and his record-breaking talent helped to grow the profile of the sport across North America and the entire world, it's no surprise that he's the first, and perhaps the only name that comes to mind to non-hockey fans. He even has that famous quote that everyone likes to reference. You know the one, you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. Though the Great One was one of the NHL's biggest stars throughout his career, and the spotlight always seemed to shine on him the brightest, thanks to winning 4 Stanley Cup championships and a whole host of individual awards, many people forget that Wayne had several younger brothers who were also professional hockey players. For example, Keith Gretzky was a 3rd-round draft pick by the Buffalo Sabres in 1985, but he never made it to the NHL, instead spending most of his time in the minor leagues before embarking on a long and successful career in coaching and management that he continues to this very day with the Edmonton Oilers. However, number 99's youngest brother was able to make it to the NHL, but his career was nowhere near as long or prestigious as Wayne's. This is the story of Brent Gretzky, the Great One's younger brother. In order to tell this tale, allow me to take you back to June 20th, 1992, when Canadian forward Brent Gretzky, who had spent the past 3 seasons with the OHL's Belleville Bulls and had scored 250 points in 194 games, was selected 49th overall at the 1992 NHL entry draft by one of the league's newest expansion teams, the Tampa Bay Lightning. Though he was chosen far lower than his older brother Wayne would have if he had been eligible for the NHL draft, instead of entering the league via the NHL-WHA merger of 1979, Brent would receive the privilege of being selected as the 49th best player of his age group in the entire hockey world, so at least he has that honour over his older brother. After his selection at the draft, Brent would leave the OHL behind and join the Atlanta Knights of the International Hockey League for the 92-93 season. Though he would spend the entirety of his first year as a pro with Tampa's minor league affiliate, the 20-year-old forward wasted little time getting comfortable, as he became one of the team's most productive players by scoring 20 goals and 54 points in 77 IHL games. These impressive numbers quickly caught the attention of the Lightning front office, who were keen to bolster their roster with some talented young players after producing a 23, 54-7 record, as well as 11th place in the Campbell Conference during their debut year in the NHL. As the 93-94 season got underway, Brent would once again find himself refining his game in the minors as he began the year with Atlanta once more. However, just a few days into the regular season, Brent would receive the chance of a lifetime. The former 3rd-round pick would be called up to Tampa Bay's roster, where he would make his NHL debut with the team. On October 9th, 1993, Brent Gretzky would don the Lightning jersey and take to the ice in his first NHL game against the Florida Panthers. Though he had proven himself to be a consistent scorer at the minor league level, the Canadian forward struggled to make an impact during his debut in the bigs, as he recorded 2 shots on goal, 2 penalty minutes and a -1, as the Lightning were shut out 2-0 by the Panthers. This performance would result in Brent being sent back down to the IHL shortly after, but he would be recalled to the Lightning roster again just 4 games later, as Tampa hosted the Los Angeles Kings. This might not sound significant on the surface, but at the time, the Los Angeles Kings were captained by none other than the Great One Wayne Gretzky, so in Brent's return to the bigs, he would face off against his older brother. Not only would this be the first and only time that the 2 Gretzky brothers would suit up in the same NHL game, Brent would be vastly overshadowed by his older brother, as Wayne finished the game with a goal and 2 assists, while Brent failed to record anything on the stat sheet, not even a shot on goal. When recounting this showdown against the Great One, Brent had this to say, quote, "We must have faced off 15 times and I won 1. I remember chasing him behind the net. I knew what he was going to do and I still found myself looking for my jog. The hardest part was after the game, going and watching ESPN. It was older Gretzky shows young Gretzky how to play the game." Despite being outplayed by his 32-year-old brother, Brent would get the opportunity to stick around the Lightning roster for the next few weeks. During this time, the former third-round pick would register his first NHL point on October 29th against the New York Islanders, as well as his first NHL goal 4 days later against the Quebec Nordiques. However, after going scoreless and registering a single shot on goal against the Boston Bruins on November 6th, Brent was sent back down to Atlanta and spent the rest of the season in the minors. So during his first stint in the NHL, Brent Gretzky scored a goal and 3 points in 10 games. Not quite Wayne Gretzky numbers, but not bad for a 21-year-old during his first trip to the bigs. Over the next season and a half, Brent would suit up for the Atlanta Knights once again and continue to put up strong numbers in the IHL, scoring 28 goals and 91 points in 121 games. This consistent production would give Brent another shot to earn a full-time spot in the NHL, as he was recalled to Tampa Bay's roster on March 10, 1995, as the Lightning took on the New Jersey Devils. The Canadian forward would not only suit up against the Devils, he would also stick around for the following 2 games of the season, which were a home-and-home against the Washington Capitals. Unfortunately though, Brent's second stint in the bigs would see similar numbers on the scoresheet to his first, as he scored just a single point and posted a -2 in 3 games. This inability to take the next step in his game prompted Tampa to send Brent back down to Atlanta on March 13th, where he would continue to play until the end of the year. In fact, Brent's 3-game stint with the Lightning during the 94-95 season would end up being his final tenure on an NHL roster, as he would never suit up in the league ever again. So Brent Gretzky, the youngest brother of the greatest hockey player to ever play the game, would take to the ice in just 13 NHL games, where he scored a single goal and 4 points, while posting a -2 in that span. Not exactly what you'd expect from the brother of the great one, but 13 NHL games is more than most hockey players get during their careers. Now, it's obvious that Brent's career in the NHL was nowhere near as prestigious or successful as his older brother Wayne's, but in the years following his brief stint in the league, some people have suggested that Brent Gretzky only made it to the NHL for 2 reasons. 1, his family name, and 2, being drafted by an expansion team that was still in its infancy when he joined their roster. Sure, being drafted by a team that is essentially starting from scratch and has yet to establish a prospect pool and a depth chart certainly helped Brent's chances of making it to the NHL, but I don't think his talents as a pro hockey player are being given the credit they deserve here. I think this argument is a little unfair, and here's why. Firstly, if Brent's family name was one of the primary reasons he made it to the NHL, why didn't his older brother Keith ever suit up in the league? After all, he was drafted in the 3rd round by Buffalo in 1985, but he never played a single NHL game during his 8-year pro career. If their last name was as influential as some people suggest, then Keith could have easily got himself into a game or 2 in the league, but he never did, so that argument is invalid if you ask me. Secondly, people seem to forget just how well Brent played in the minors between his selection at the draft and his final stint with Tampa. I mean, he scored 145 points in 198 IHL games in a league that was considered one of, if not the 2nd best league in the world at the time. Any NHL franchise would call up that player at some point and see if they could produce the same numbers at the NHL level, expansion team or not. Were Brent's chances helped by Tampa being a young team without an abundance of talent? Of course they were, but his consistent production is what got him a chance in the NHL, not the name on the back of his jersey. And lastly, it's not as if Brent played horribly while he was in the NHL either. He scored 4 points in 13 games. There are plenty of other players that have lasted much longer in the league and been far less productive than Brent's point every 3 game pace. Of course, you can make the argument that Brent was supposed to be a top 6 scorer and he wasn't productive enough at the NHL level, while these other players in question are more defensively minded depth players or enforcers, but I don't think it's outside the realm of possibility that Brent could have produced decent numbers if he was given the chance to play a full season in the NHL. Based on his rate of production, he could have put up 25 to 30 points during a full rookie year. That's really not that bad. But regardless of how or why he got there, Brent did end up playing 13 NHL games over 2 seasons during his early 20s. I'm sure there are plenty of hockey fans and players that wish they could boast a dozen appearances in the best league in the world. Following his final 3-game stint with Tampa Bay, Brent Gretzky would finish off the season in Atlanta, score 51 points in 67 IHL games, before leaving the Lightning organization behind and taking his talents elsewhere for the following 95-96 season. After spending the next 2 years suiting up in a variety of minor leagues, including the IHL, the AHL and the ECHL, where he scored 82 points in 131 total games, the Canadian forward would head overseas for the 97-98 season, where he joined EC Graz of the Austrian League. However, Brent would spend just a single season in Austria and score 57 points in 35 games, before returning to North America for the 98-99 season, where he remained until the end of his career. Upon his return back home, Brent would briefly suit up for the AHL's Hershey Bears and the IHL's Chicago Wolves, before joining the Asheville Smoke of the United Hockey League later in the year. In fact, the former third-round pick would go on to spend the next 8 seasons of his career in the UHL with a variety of teams, and became known as quite the point producer, thanks to registering 203 goals and 615 points in just 458 games. His most productive season being a 36-goal, 128-point year with Asheville in 99-2000. By the time the 05-06 season rolled around, Brent, now 33 years old, was starting to feel Father Time catch up to him, and he wanted to enjoy his last few years of hockey in a less professional, less competitive atmosphere. So, the Canadian forward spent the final 3 years of his career primarily in the Eastern Ontario Senior Hockey League, along with brief stints in the Major Hockey League and the Allen Cup. Brent's 5-game stint with the Brantford Blast during the 2008 Allen Cup would end up being the final time he would lace up his skates in a pro or semi-pro setting, as the Canadian forward retired from the sport at the conclusion of the 07-08 season at 36 years old. So after being taken in the 3rd round of the NHL entry draft, after playing 13 NHL games for the Tampa Bay Lightning and scoring 4 points for his efforts, and after spending the majority of his time in the minor leagues, Brent Gretzky would call it a day on his career, having scored 336 goals and 1,001 points in 889 games since turning pro in 1992. Not only would Brent retire with over 1,000 points to his name, but his 4-point performance in the NHL helped him to earn a place in the league's history books, as his career numbers, coupled with his older brother Wayne's, combine for the most points scored by 2 brothers in NHL history, with 2,861. Not only that, but this total also sits second among points scored by any number of brothers, only behind the Sutter family, who combined for 73 more points with 2,934. Clearly Wayne did all the heavy lifting here, but Brent's production did help to reach that milestone. At least a little bit. Since retiring from the sport in 2008, Brent Gretzky has taken up a job with the Ontario Provincial Police, and proudly serves as a police officer to this very day. It just goes to show you folks that even a 16-year veteran of the sport, and the brother of the greatest NHL player to have ever lived, has to pay the bills too, you know. Though his time in the NHL was short-lived, and his career never came anywhere close to his older brothers, Brent Gretzky was able to carve out an impressive stint as a pro hockey player by scoring 1,000 points over a 16-year time span. It may have been practically impossible to steal the spotlight from the Great One, and for him to get the recognition he deserved, but that doesn't mean his career was void of any success. In fact, quite the opposite, as Brent became known as a talented scorer throughout the minor leagues, and got to travel both the continent and elsewhere around the world while playing the sport he loves. That sounds pretty good to me. He may not have been the greatest, but this former 3rd round pick had one hell of a career. And that's the story of Brent Gretzky. What do you guys think about the career of the youngest Gretzky brother? Do you think he should have been given a longer look at the NHL level, or was he a minor league star at best? Also, do you want me to make a video on their middle brother Keith? Let me know in the comments below, I would love to hear what you guys think. But thank you very much for watching, guys, I hope you have enjoyed. Please feel free to like, subscribe, share, or watch some of my other videos. Thank you very much for watching, and goodbye! A big thank you to Chris Gadsby, Connor B, John Plomin, Jordan Whitehead, Martin Tolness, Paul Mallia, Roman from London, The Legacy and Worthless Pieces for helping support this video via Patreon. If you too want to help support the channel a little bit further and get a shout out at the end of every future video, make sure you head over to patreon.com/oddmanrush and become a patron today.